This is the First Gen Pilot Podcast episode coming right up.
It's 835 Rochester departure radar.
What's going on, aviators? My name is Abraham and I am your host. Today's episode we have Chelsea, an airline pilot. In this episode we talk about how she did her training through ATP Flight School and got all of her ratings done within 6 months, which is pretty crazy, and it's known for that for anybody who goes to ATP Flight School. We also talk about how she secured a Part 135 job flying organs across the country, which is a really crazy job and very interesting. And aviators, make sure to check out the First Gen Pilot YouTube channel, where I have great information regarding flight training and a lot of good information on there. So make sure to check us out on YouTube at First Gen Pilot. And I've put an Amazon link together with all the pilot gear that you can think of: headsets, knee pads, books, anything that a pilot needs. I have it on this Amazon link. So make sure you check it out down in the description of this podcast. Also, it's going to be on my Instagram page at First Gen Pilot. Also, if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to follow us on any of the platforms that you listen to this on. Also, leave a review. Let me know what you thought of this episode. And without further ado, here's Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chelsea, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota originally. And right now I'm a first officer on the 737 at Sun Country Airlines. Very hometown local.
Yeah. Hey, Chelsea. Welcome on to First Gen Pilot Podcast. Now, we appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll kind of attack this right away. And first question I'd like to ask is, how did you get into aviation?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but I had kind of an unconventional start. So a lot of my family was in aviation growing up. My parents actually met as flight attendants at Sun Country. So they were both flight attendants, and the joke in our family is kind of, if Sun Country didn't exist, I wouldn't exist today right now. I wouldn't be speaking here on this podcast. So
Yeah.
they met as flight attendants, and then my dad eventually became a pilot for Sun Country, and he's currently there now.
Mm-hmm.
And then my grandfather was one of the many brand new pilots that came over and helped to start Sun Country. So I've had a long history in aviation in terms of my family, but growing up, I never really thought it was an option. And I think a lot of young females think that too, that it's not for them and they couldn't do it. So my dad, he was trying to talk my two younger brothers into becoming pilots. And he bought a share in a small flying club. And I'm like, if they can do it, I want to do it too. So I have a brother who's 3 years younger than me, and then a brother who's 8 years younger. So I went to school for a business degree at the University of Minnesota, and I actually wanted to go to law school. Since I was 8 years old, I always wanted to go to law school, and I don't know what 8-year-old wants to be a lawyer. It's super weird. But I was always interested in law and politics, and I'm one of those people who actually likes reading the FAR AIM. So weird, but I like interpreting the law. It's super strange. So I originally went to the University of Minnesota. I got a degree in business, and I did this program called PSEO, and you've probably heard of it.
Yep.
In Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah.
So it stands for Post-Secondary Enrollment Option, and I got a 4-year degree in about 2 years. So since I graduated super early, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't like the corporate 9-to-5 life. And my brother started taking lessons. So shortly after he did, we started taking lessons together. So he would sit in the front and fly, I would observe in the back, and then we'd swap. And we actually soloed on the same day. My dad was watching from the tower. It was a super cool experience. And around that time, I was like, oh, damn, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I think I want to pursue this. So I moved out to Arizona, and I went to ATP Flight School. You probably heard of them. Very
Pretty sure everybody heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So they actually have a Minnesota location now at the Flying Cloud Airport, but back then they didn't have that. So I moved out to Arizona. I finished my instrument rating to my MEI in about, I'd say, like 6-7 months, and this was during the time of COVID. So I just made this career change. I was all excited. I'm like, oh no, is this the best idea right now? But it all worked out really well. So I was a student down there, and then I instructed there for about 8 months. I was a double I instructor for a while, and then was a stage check instructor because we had a location that partnered with Arizona State University. So did that, and then I moved back home. I really don't like the Arizona heat, but Arizona was good.
Yeah.
But it was too warm for me, so I'm like, I want to move back home, be by family again. And I got a job at the Flying Cloud Airport it's called executive aviation or aviation charter.
Hmm.
So I flew King Airs for about 2 years, and we did primarily medevac, which is it's really cool. I never thought I'd be flying organs around, but
Yeah.
it was an awesome experience. A lot of late nights. So we did about 70% medevac work, like 30% charter work, and then did that for a couple of years and got hired on with Sun Country last year in April. So currently first officer there, and it's been an awesome experience. And yeah, looking towards the future.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like you had a really nice and long journey there, and definitely
Yeah,
worth it in the end.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's talk about so like your flight training portion. So ATP Flight School. I mean, it's one of the options that people can pursue in. So and then, like you mentioned, you do pretty much everything in about 6 months. And how did that feel? Was that a bit like too much all at the same time, or was it kind of kind of work your way into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I get a lot of people asking me that, and it's hard to answer because, like, there's so many different paths you can take towards becoming a pilot.
Yep.
ATP is a good option, but you have to be a specific type of person. You have to self study. I mean, you can't have any job on the side. I mean, you can, but it would be really hard. So I think every morning and night when you're not training, or even when you have flights during the day, you're always studying because it's such a fast track program. But
Hmm.
I got through obviously successfully, and I had a great experience. I have a lot of friends from ATP now, and yeah, I instructed there. So I was back in when the program had the guaranteed instructor job. So you
Hmm.
have to meet certain criteria to get the job.
Hmm.
But I would say, yeah, you definitely have to be a type A kind of person. You have to take your studies seriously, because it's a commitment. It's a big commitment because it's really expensive. It was, but it's more expensive now. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, ATP was. I mean, I looked into it when I was starting my training, but it was just like
really,
it's one of those things where if you're on the younger side of the curve, it's like you'd rather just go to college. Like you mentioned, you got your college out of the way, so it makes sense to just do ATP, right?
yeah,
So like
exactly.
for someone like me who's right out of high school, it would have made sense to just go to college and do it right that way, you know. But everybody
Yeah,
has a different preference.
exactly. Yeah, it's your own preference, and like you said, I had a 4 year, and I'm like, I looked into Thunderbird, which is another one.
Hmm.
And then I got accepted to Embry-Riddle. I'm like, I don't want to go through schooling again. I already did my 4 year degree. So ATP was a perfect fit, and I would really suggest it if you're passionate about aviation and you're just ready to tackle all of your ratings.
Yeah, definitely. And then so let's talk a little bit about funding your training. How did you go by
Mhm.
that, and how did you attack that?
Yeah, that was an interesting one too. So I completed my 4 year degree. I did the PSEO program. I know this isn't flight training, but I'll get to that in a second. So I completed my 4 year degree in 2 years. So I saved a lot of money during college because the state of Minnesota pays for 2 years of schooling. So it's an
Yeah.
awesome program. If anyone's listening to this and has questions about PSEO, let me know. But after that, I was like, how can I fund my flight training kind of the same way with scholarships?
Hmm.
And I started looking around. There's so many scholarships. You probably know this too. Even if you're not going through a university program, a 141 program, and
Hmm.
you're just going through a Part 61 route like I did, there's scholarships for let's see. There's scholarships, excuse me, for everyone, but through Women in Aviation, the 99s, OBAP. So I funded all of my training with scholarships actually, which is kind of crazy because at ATP I'd get, for example, I'd get a scholarship to get my commercial rating. And by the time they actually sent the funds over, I'd already have my commercial rating. So they just reimbursed me for it,
Right.
which which was really awesome. And I started looking into these scholarships more, and people don't apply to them. And you have to write a nice essay, but you can modify the essay for every different scholarship. So
Hmm.
when I was going to ATP, it was kind of like having a little job on the side because I'd go and on my weekends, that was my thing to do. I'd be like, okay, what kind of scholarship can I apply for?
Hmm.
And there's not just financial scholarships, but I want a type rating scholarship. So I want a scholarship to get a type rating on a Citation 650, which is super rare, and it was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
It set me up really well for Sun Country training. See, I actually didn't go through with it, but I did get a seaplane rating scholarship. The timing didn't really work out. Let's see, a tailwheel scholarship. So there's scholarships for everything. I swear. So yeah, my advice would be if anyone's listening to this, definitely look into anything and just use Google. You can just search Google because people are like, "How'd you get all these scholarships?" I'm like, "Well, this thing called Google."
Yeah, there's just a ton of them out there. I mean, you could probably like just look into it. I mean, like you mentioned, Google is a big source that you can just type in and like find a bunch
Yeah,
of them. And like there's like OBAP and AOPA have a bunch of them listed on their websites too. So
yeah,
if anyone
and
want to check them out, yeah.
yeah, and there's actually there's a lot of local ones too.
Hmm.
So you probably know this, but the national ones are harder to get just because they're a lot more competitive. But
Hmm.
the Minnesota Pilots Association is one that is really local and small. So I would just make a big Excel sheet with all the due dates and all these
Yeah,
scholarships. So yeah, definitely looking local was a good thing.
yeah, definitely, I agree. All right, and then so let's talk about you instructing. So this is the big question. Like people are like, can I just go into getting paid as a commercial pilot, or should I do the flight instructing route? What do you think about it, and like, what was your decision about becoming a instructor?
Yeah. I would say I totally understand the people who do not want to instruct. I understand. But my advice to people is people who are going through their ratings and don't want to instruct is definitely instruct for a while. I think it's amazing experience. And you're put in a different position because before going through all your ratings, your flight instructor, they were the one responsible ultimately. So
Hmm.
now you're the one responsible and it teaches you good aeronautical decision making and confidence and thinking outside the box. So I would say even though a lot of people try to avoid instructing, it really builds your skills and your CRM skills
Hmm.
especially. So yeah, definitely instruct for a little bit, and if you don't like it and it's not your cup of tea, what I did was I got a 135 job, like we talked about at
Hmm.
Aviation Charter, flying King Airs.
Yep.
Uh, so around 500 hours is when you can get a Part 135 job, but instruct until then. I think it's better experience in aerial surveying or skydive jumping, anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely. I agree a lot. I mean, I'm currently doing flight instructing ground here in the university, and I just like the concept that they use and like teaching people. I mean, yesterday I was at the house up in the cities with my family, and my little brother's interested in aviation. He's like 14, right? And then
oh,
he's always asking about aviation stuff, and I got him this course like a ground school, and I told him here, just go through it if you whenever you like, because you were ways
yeah,
away before you start your training.
oh
And
yeah.
yesterday he asked me, hey, what happens when your airspeed indicator stops working? So my flight instructing thing kind of came out because I'm kind of learning about this right now in class, and I'm like, okay, let me try to explain this the easiest way. It was like the hardest
Yeah.
thing.
You're getting practice though, and it's so funny, like you said,
Yeah,
it's like the easiest concepts. Sometimes students will ask you something, and the easiest concepts are like, "How do I explain that to them?"
right.
And so flight instructing, it really builds your communication skills,
Definitely, yeah.
and it makes you think of things you'd never think about, because I had students that would ask me things, I'm like, "How the heck did you think of that?" That's something that would never come to my mind,
Exactly, yeah.
but yeah, like you said, it's hard to explain simple things, and it really builds your communication skills. So I would, if I did, I would do the same way if I had to go back. Flight instruct for sure for at least a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and then like, so let's talk about that like the job you got, the part 135 job that you got, and how did you kind of apply for it, and how did you find it, and how did you go by it?
Yeah, it was actually through networking. It's a very small company, so they don't advertise or put out any job applications
Hmm.
online. So I had a contact through ATP that he said, "Well, I fly organs around Minnesota, around the Midwest." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds really cool and weird." So it sounds interesting. I never thought that was an option.
Hmm.
And so I started looking into it more, and I was on LinkedIn stalking all the employees in the company. I wanted to know more about it.
Right.
So what I did was like I said, very small company, but I brought my resume into the chief pilot, and they get a lot of people asking about first officer positions, and it was really just timing too.
Hmm.
Timing is everything in this industry. So I brought in my resume, and he said, "Oh yeah, we actually have vacancies, and we have slots open for first officer position." So I did not expect this, but they interviewed me on the spot,
Okay.
and when I got home, they're like, "Do you want this job?" Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, and they asked a lot of instrument questions. So interviews past your check rides are very instrument heavy, and I was the double I instructor at ATP in Arizona
Mhm.
at the time. So it kind of worked out perfectly because he was
Yeah.
asking me all the instrument questions. Yeah, so that's how that happened. It's one of my favorite jobs I think I've ever had till this day.
Did you ever have had to touch any of the organs, or like when you're transporting them, or do you not like get in
Yeah.
contact with it?
So it's really interesting because the organs are you know when you go to Walmart or Target, you just see those Coleman coolers or
Yeah.
whatever the brand names are. They're just
Uh-huh.
in those coolers, so it's nothing super official.
Okay.
Or they're in a cardboard box, and sometimes they pass them to me. And I'm like, okay. Some nights I'd be like, okay, yeah, this is cool, and then
There's a
other
heart
times,
in here.
yeah, I'd be like, no, I don't want the liability of this.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'd put them in a machine, the hearts, especially in it's called an OCS machine, and
Okay.
I don't know what it stands for, but it's a machine we'd put in the cabin and it would keep the heart pumping. So it was super interesting, but yeah, we had an incident in St. Paul where somebody dropped one and the organ wasn't viable anymore. So after that, like I'm not liable for this.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch it, but yeah, sometimes I did get to carry them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, aviation is super cool. I mean, you're actually getting this to someone who actually is in need, and like being a part of that is actually pretty huge, and like makes you feel kind of
Yeah.
fulfillment that you can actually help in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was super rewarding, and after a while, you kind of become numb to it a little bit because like you get so used to it. You know, you're like, oh, there's an organ that we're flying in the middle of the night across the country, but yeah, really rewarding, and I love who I work with there. So
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that would be for me though. I hate like blood and like seeing any
oh, you
organs.
don't have to see any of that. Yeah, don't worry. That's
Yeah,
specifically why I didn't choose a job in healthcare. I can't
yeah,
do blood shots or anything. Don't see any of it, so it's great.
yeah. I have another brother who's interested in like medical in the medical field, and he's always talking about like blood and all that. I'm like, I'm not into that. Sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah, we actually transported around a lot of nurses and doctors, and they're
Yeah,
like, "Do you wanna see the organ when it came out of the body?" Like,
I'm
"No,
good.
no, please don't show that to me."
Yeah, I probably won't eat for like a couple of weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so here's another question: have you had any scary experiences throughout your career so far?
Um, yeah, I think if any pilot told you no, they'd be lying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely had some interesting experiences. I think one that stood out to me was, and goes again back to the flight instructing thing,
Hmm.
and why you should flight instruct. But I was a new instructor at the time. I had just received my first instrument student, and he was actually from Minnesota too. So we
Okay.
bonded over that. But I can't remember what we were doing exactly, but we were going to Las Vegas. And I think this was like my third or second flight as a flight instructor. So we looked at all the weather, we decided to go, and then we started picking up some icing on the Cessna. And this was around the Prescott area. So he looked at me, he's like, "Do you see that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been watching it for a while now. Let's just continue monitoring it." And it started building up more, and it looked like we were just going to be IMC the entire way. So we diverted to Prescott, and
Hmm.
that's where Embry-Riddle is. So super busy. I don't know how they fly there in the summer because the density altitude's so high. It's up in
Yeah.
the mountains. But this was in the winter, and so we successfully diverted. We waited it out. We decided we're going to go back home, do the safe thing. And as we were climbing out, he looked at me. He's like, "Chelsea, the airplane's not climbing." Like, this is winter, so the density altitude's still high, but it's not as high as summer. It's
Hmm.
just so high that the airplane barely climbs. And he's freaking out. I'm like, "It's okay. It's okay. We'll get above the mountains. It's just because we're at a really high altitude." So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was one time where I'm like, and it's very intimidating being a new instructor, but it's like any position,
Hmm.
becoming a first officer at Sun Country, you're new to the position. It's a
Yeah.
little bit intimidating. You're excited, but you're nervous.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, it's just you learn a lot, and you learn a lot from your students too. So that was one time when I was he was spooked, so it was making me spooked, but yeah, it wasn't anything big. Um, let's see, any other time? Well, trying to think of any other times that I've been kind of spooked. I think at Aviation Charter, we had really old King Airs. It
Okay.
was a really, really fun job, but
Yeah.
the pilot would just randomly click off in the middle of a snowstorm on an approach down to minimums. And what's going on? So,
Yeah.
so
That would not
it,
be fun.
yeah, I know. No, at least we weren't complacent. They
Hmm.
kept you on top of your game. The King Airs did. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, other than that, I really can't think of anything else. I think in Minnesota, you get a lot of exposure to weather and snowstorms, and
Yeah. A ton of
it's
that.
yeah.
Yeah. No mountains, but just you get a lot of snow and rain and
Oh yeah.
yeah. All right. And then so let's say, have you had any failures so far or throughout your career, and have they affected you in any way, like getting a job or anything?
Yeah, yeah, I think people don't wanna admit them. I think it's kind of a hush hush thing, but
Okay.
you learn a lot from them. And back then, it really wasn't accepted to
Mm-hmm.
have failures, but now if you learn from them, we're all human beings at the end of the day. But I did receive a notice of disapproval on my commercial single engine check ride
Okay.
for a soft field landing, and it wasn't a very soft a very soft landing. It wasn't like one of those smooth, grassy landings that you'd want.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a notice of disapproval, and of course, I was like, "Oh no, I'm never gonna get a job at my dream carrier. My why did I do this? My career's over." And no, it's not like that. I think if you learn from it, and I taught my students a lot from it too about my mistakes and the importance of a go around, especially.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you learn from it and you're able to explain it, especially in an interview, that it's not anybody else's fault but yours, everything's fine. And personally, I grew a lot from it and I learned a lot from it. So it's a very different industry than it was back then.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And like those are the moments that you actually get even stronger in those like
Mhm.
things. I mean, you probably go grease a soft field landing now. You probably
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So you just move on forward. I mean, at that moment, you might feel like everything, like the world is coming down on you and nothing's going right. But just
Right.
persevere and like stay through with it because you're gonna go through it and you're gonna get through it.
Exactly. And it's kind of an interesting story because we were taxiing back, and it wasn't a bad landing. It was just not a soft field landing. And we're taxiing back, and the examiner's like, "Okay, good job, but I'm gonna have you redo the soft field." And in my head, I was like, "Wait, I didn't know at the time. I thought I passed." So,
Yeah.
um, I guess a good point in communication too is soft field and short field sound the same.
Yeah.
So in my head, I thought he asked me to perform a short field, but he asked me to perform a soft field. So I was trying to hit the landing point,
Hmm.
and, because I think you have to land within 200 feet, I
Yeah.
think.
I think
Yep,
so. Yeah.
mine's 0 plus 200, I can't remember, but yeah, always brief what you're gonna do, just be on the same page with the person in the cockpit too, that's another big learning point for
Hmm.
me. But, yeah, we're taxiing back, I'm like, "Wait," and the wheels are turning, I'm like, "I thought I did a soft view." I couldn't figure it out, so just communicate, and it's not a big deal at the end of the day, but you don't want a lot of failures or busts, but just make sure you do learn from them.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I agree. All right. And then also, if you were to go back and redo your whole journey again, what are some things that you do the same? What are some things that you do differently?
Yeah. Oh boy. I would do in terms of the funding, the scholarships,
Hmm.
and looking into scholarships, it was a lot of work, but I would definitely do that the same, and I would really wouldn't change a lot. I think we all learn from the mistakes that we made,
Hmm.
like my commercial single engine check ride. So there's not a lot I would change. I really like the way I did it. I got a degree in business, so a little bit different, and then went on to flight school.
Okay.
I think what I would change or what I would probably look at doing differently if I didn't go the civilian route, the Part 61 route, and get scholarships is I would definitely look into the Guard or the reserves. I
Okay.
don't know a lot about the military side of things, but I know they pay for your training and you get a lot of good benefits. And I have a couple friends, I think they're in the Guard or the reserve, I can't remember, but definitely look into that if you are looking into which route to take or which path to take in aviation because
Hmm.
there's so many opportunities on the military side of things.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Mhm.
All right. And then, your end goal with flying. I know you're at a major airline right now, and where do you see yourself in the future?
Yeah. So yeah, a little little secret, but so I'm at Sun Country right now. I interviewed with United and Delta last month, so January, and I got a job offer at both. I'll probably take Delta. Yeah, I'll probably take Delta just because I'm local in Minneapolis, and I like Delta. They have a really good business and company. But I think my end goal with that would be to get involved with their volunteer activities and become a pilot mentor. I think mentorship is so important,
Hmm.
especially with younger people starting out in their career. And I want to fly internationally. I think that's yeah, that's the end goal for me.
Hmm.
I look at trips, and I studied abroad in Cuba, Brazil, and Australia when I was in college. So
Cool.
I
Yeah.
love traveling and seeing other countries, and that would be the end goal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all pilots want to travel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the reason.
I don't know. Some no, I've flown with some guys, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't like this traveling stuff and staying in hotels." I'm like, "Do you know what
Why are you
traveling
here?
entails?" Yeah. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I get it, but
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Flying international is definitely one of my bucket lists as well. Going flying like
yeah.
overseas and doing that stuff.
Yeah, Tony and I, so my boyfriend and I, we went to South Korea. We were doing a standby non-rev trip, and we were going with some of his SkyWest buddies, and
Okay.
they happened to plan this trip during spring break, and we
Hmm.
wanted to go to Japan originally. So this
Okay.
is what happens when you leave planning to three guys. No offense, but so they're like, "We're gonna go to Japan." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm just along for the ride. You guys plan this. You guys got this." So it was cherry blossom season in Japan, so
Hmm.
everyone's trying to go to Japan, and it was spring break, and we're trying to non-rev travel.
Yeah.
So Tony's like, "Okay, pack your bag. We're gonna go to Guatemala, wherever there's open seats. Guatemala, Chile, or South Korea." I'm like, how do I pack for that? Because South Korea, winter, Guatemala, and Chile, it's hot as crap. So we ended up going to South Korea. But my point with that is, we flew on a 350, and we got to go up and see the cockpit and the rest area. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. It's an amazing airplane.
Yeah, definitely. All right. The next question is, how did you stay motivated? And as we know, flight training can be really brutal sometimes and like really tough. And how did you stay motivated and what helped you?
Yeah, I think ultimately, so I went through a very fast track program. I think every single month I had a check ride. I think one month I had like two check rides. So I think just the achievement itself of passing the check ride and passing the writtens is kind of a push to continue going. But
Hmm.
definitely having a good support network, that really helped. We had about 75 instructors at our location,
Okay.
and that was my favorite part of instructing, was my students and the people that I worked with. And we got together, we studied, and we passed ideas and off of each other, and it was just a really supportive environment, and I had great instructors as well. So yeah, if you don't, it's a thing, but if you don't feel like your instructor and you are really on the same page, because we're all different people at the end of the day, definitely
Hmm.
my advice would be to just let them know and find a different instructor. But yeah, it would be just the achievements, the support network, and I tried to plan things. I'm very much a to-do list person. So I think maybe, I don't know if every pilot is, but I like my checklist. So I try to read so many pages every day and then check it off, just so that I would have a goal and it wouldn't seem like I was
Hmm.
drowning in work to do. Um, so then I would reward myself. So if I got through successfully everything that I wanted to do, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go to the movies with my friends, for example, or I'll go on a walk with my dog. Something small, but just just to break up the studying a little bit helped.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually, that goes a long way because I mean, sometimes in training, it just feels like you're not moving forward, just feel like you're in the same spot, you know?
Yeah,
And that checklist actually can go a long way because you're like, actually, I'm actually moving along. It's just slower pace it right now, you know?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then, like, one most challenging thing about your career, what was it?
Yeah. Hmm. I would say what was challenging was probably the most rewarding, but just financing
Hmm.
the my education, the flight training especially. I think ATP right now is $100,000 starting from your private, which is crazy when you
Yeah,
look at it, and it's really scary too, because you're doing all this research, and if you go in to get your private, you're starting from square one, and you really don't know what this career entails first. So I guess my advice for everyone looking to go to ATP is get your private outside before you take on a $100,000 loan.
definitely.
But just, yeah, just training it, I knew that I didn't wanna have a lot of loans, because I didn't have a lot of loans from the University of Minnesota, and I wanted to avoid that as much as possible.
Hmm.
But it was a lot of work getting scholarships, and a lot of long nights applying for them, and asking questions to the board, but a lot of them came with super cool opportunities. Like I said, I got a scholarship to go to the Women in Aviation conference.
Hmm.
I got invited to the NGPA conference. So they all came with their little quirks and cool opportunities, but that was one of the most challenging, because I was trying to juggle my flight training with applying for scholarships and trying to finance my career.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say definitely funding your training can be one of the biggest like stops or like the biggest obstacles for many people who are doing this aviation thing. And like you mentioned, scholarship is a major thing. Look into it. Just I know, like for me, like or everybody talks is like, hey, I'm never gonna get that scholarship. It's like, even if it's
Yeah,
like $200, go ahead and apply because you never know. It's
right.
$200.
And it all adds up, seriously. Like you said, I tell everyone because the people are like, I don't want to apply for something that's $500. Like, that's
Yeah.
$500, and how many people are thinking the same way as you? Probably a lot of people. So yeah,
Yeah. If someone walked up to you, hey, here's $500, would you say no? And like,
yeah,
is that
exactly.
tight? You know, you gotta go get it.
Exactly.
All right, and then so last question I have is, what's one tip or you have for anybody who's currently pursuing this dream or wanting to pursue this aviation dream?
Yeah. Um, well, I have a lot of tips, but I'll keep it short.
Okay, yeah,
So
definitely.
I would first say get involved, especially when you're just starting out. We have a really great Women in Aviation chapter, Stars of the North here in Minnesota, and
Hmm.
I was involved in that before I even started flying, and now I'm a board member for the chapter. So I met a lot of people and a lot of mentors and learned about the scholarships that way even. So definitely get involved, and you don't have to go to every event or every meeting, but just learn people, learn to network and learn to meet new people. So definitely get involved in all the different organizations and find a mentor that you trust and somebody you feel like you can confide in and ask questions, because this career is such an interesting career to navigate. I mean, people don't the general public, they don't really know a lot about aviation. I get asked what my routes are all the time.
Yeah.
So that just says something about what the general populace knows about aviation.
Hmm.
Uh, so definitely find a mentor and find a mentor that aligns with what you want to do. So if you want to go to the airlines or if you want to fly cargo or stay Part 135, find someone who aligns with that. And then I would say my last piece of advice is take every opportunity, especially with scholarships, like we talked about,
Yeah.
and keep all your doors open, because I think a lot of people start this career and they think, well, I want to be an airline pilot and I only want to go to Delta or only want to go to United or I only want to fly for NetJets or whatever the goal is. And that doesn't always happen because this career is extremely it's all over the place, cyclical, and we never know what's going to happen from month
Right.
to month. So
Hmm.
keep all your doors open. And I never thought I'd be flying organs around Part 135, and that opportunity just presented itself, and it was an amazing experience, and I learned a lot. So don't corner yourself in, but talk to everybody about their jobs and what they like and don't like about them, and definitely consider all options.
Yeah, definitely. Networking is a huge thing when it comes to aviation.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned a million times on this podcast, but definitely key to this whole
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. And then we'll finish this with a would you rather game. I'll give you a couple options and you pick one from that.
Okay, sweet.
All right. So first question is, would you rather fly general aviation or commercial?
Oh boy. I love my job. Oh gosh. If I had to pick one, I'd say commercial. I love GA,
Okay.
but it's a lot of work sometimes, especially flying in the winter in Minnesota. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I'd say commercial, but I do love GA flying. It's a
Okay.
blast.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. And the next one, would you rather fly over beaches or mountains?
Beaches. I love beaches, yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful. I got to go to, Cancun, Mazatlan, and we got to fly over Cuba actually and go to, Jamaica, Montego Bay with Sun Country, and
Sweet.
I looked down, I'm like, "This is gorgeous." It's amazing. The water is super blue, so and
Yeah.
there's less risk. I like beaches, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think beaches is actually pretty cool. I'm going to Hawaii this spring break, and it's gonna be my first time there. And I hope to
Well,
see the blues and all that cool stuff.
awesome. I just got back, oh gosh, a couple days ago from Kona. So Sun Country does this thing called the Kona Express, and we
Okay.
take wealthy people from Kona to LA. So it was my second ETOPS flight, which was really cool. But I love
Yeah.
Hawaii. So yeah, like you said, beaches.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And the next one is, would you rather fly high wing or low wing?
Oh gosh, my boyfriend and I disagree about this all the time. I say low wing. I hope you
Okay.
agree with me because you fly Archer. I love the way that they land, and I don't know. My boyfriend's like, "Don't you like seeing below the wing?" Yeah, you can still see with the low wing.
Landing is more important.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about the Skyhawks. I like landing the low wing airplanes better. I
Okay.
trained originally in a Warrior, and then ATP had all Cessnas at the Gateway Airport in Mesa, Arizona. So I'm just a low wing girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say low wing for maneuvering and like
Yeah.
when you're maneuvering and all that stuff and landing. And then Cessna, I think it only has that seeing outside and all that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess it depends. But
Yeah. All right. And then we have, would you rather fly Airbus or Boeing?
oh no. Okay, so I fly the 737 right now.
Okay.
So Boeing is all I know, but I've heard amazing things about the Airbus.
hmm
Since I fly Boeing, I have to go with Boeing.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
hope I get to fly an Airbus one day. I'm sure I will.
Yeah. Your
But
answer probably is going to change once you start
yeah,
flying them.
it definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The last one is, would you rather fly IFR or VFR?
Oh. Oh, that's kind of like commercial or GA. I love my instrument rating,
Yeah.
and just the different procedures.
hmm
I like the maneuvers, but I just like the black and white of IFR flying, if that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
what I do every day. But so when I go up in the fly GA and the little airplanes, I'm like,
hmm
oh, number one, this feels like a toy, and number two, I can just do whatever I want. It's
Right.
it's so cool. But I barely ever go up flying GA anymore. But yeah, I would say IFR.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, do you like try to go up sometimes during GA stuff?
Yeah, we still have it's a very small flying club, but we still have a share in it.
hmm
It's the same flying club that I got my private at, so I try to go and just stay proficient in the
Yeah.
single engine
You
airplanes.
never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went up with my brother, and he never completed his private. He's gonna work on it, and it's kind of funny because all my family thought he was gonna be the pilot, and we switched places. So he went to
Right.
business school in Mankato, I became the pilot. But
hmm
anyways, we went up because he's looking into getting into it again, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Like, "Oh, don't worry, I have hundreds of hours in these things. Don't worry." And then we get up, and like, "Oh, this is kind of weird," but
Yeah.
we were all good. So, but yeah, sometimes I do. I just try to stay proficient.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your story. It was definitely a fun one to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thank you. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really hope you enjoyed this and found it beneficial. If you have any questions for Chelsea, make sure you check it out on Instagram at Chelsea the Pilot. She'll definitely be more than happy to answer any questions that you have for her. Also, don't forget to check us out on YouTube again. I'm going to have all the great videos on there about regarding flight training. I'm going to leave a link down in the description of this show notes, and check us out on YouTube at First Gen Pilot. Until next time, keep the blue side up. We'll see ya.